But don't just take it from me. Take it from my good friend, the
Gay
Transformer.
Knockout.
This is going to be juicy.
Episode 10 of Emmy Award-winning animated series Transformers Prime introduces us to a new character called Knockout. Knockout is the Decepticons' new medic, and throughout the show he spends his downtime talking about his illustrious finish, striking flamboyant little poses, checking his nails, and making himself look very pretty. In his first scene, arguably his most important in the entire show, the following exchange takes place.
Yes, right, you're one of those.
Come again.
So, Knockout's gay, right? The layman may say yes, but the answer's a little more complicated than that. When I was like 14 and I watched this show beginning to end for the first time, I was like, damn, this guy's a friend of Dorothy's if I've ever seen one. If Knockout wore shoes, he'd be light in the loafers, you know what I mean? Today I'm comfortably bisexual and I'm far more aware of what good and bad gay representation looks like. Where does this leave the good doctor? Like I said, it's complicated. My whole life I've had this idea of Knockout in my head, one that's largely been shaped by the fandom that surrounds him. Knockout's a prissy gay guy who's in love with his big buff truck partner named Breakdown. In my head, his gayness is so powerful that he's been posed like this on my shelf for the better part of 2 years. What was he doing? What is that? But on a recent rewatch of Transformers Prime, I came to this realization that, and I'm probably going to get some flack for spitting the facts here, but I realized that Knockout isn't the gay representation the fandom gassed him up to be for so many years.
Precisely my what?
I feel like people just sort of associate Knockout as being the gay one who's Breakdown's boyfriend, when really his supposed gayness could very easily be read as just intense flamboyancy. He's more ostentatious than anything, like a theater kid. His vibe is one of deep smugness and vanity. He thinks he's smarter than everybody else and he wants the entire Decepticon armada to know just how shiny and pretty he is. But on the contrary, Knockout does exhibit a lot of traits that could be just as easily read as queer-coded, in a possibly out-of-touch 2010 kind of way. Knockout claims to be an automobile enthusiast, which leads to a couple scenes throughout the show where he compliments the other characters' vehicle modes in a way that could be very easily interpreted as him hitting on them.
Sweet rims. 24 gauge? You're real heavy duty. Though I must confess, I have always admired your lustrous finish.
There's a couple other things we'll get to later, but right now, I guess you can call me a Knockout centrist. I can see why people would argue he is not gay, but reading Knockout as gay is a totally valid interpretation. I'm not coming out here to tell you to stop drawing your Knockout X Breakdown art or to not ship Knockout with whatever boy kisser you want. I would gladly ship Knockout with my own self-insert OC if I had one, because you know what? Gay or not, Knockout is a knockout.
I live to serve.
People have called Knockout a bad gay stereotype because he's cowardly and obsessed with his own appearance, and the show makes a lot of jokes at the expense of his fruity demeanor. Well, what if I like the bad stereotype? What if I think it's kinda hot? What if I don't care that he doesn't accurately represent a gay man? A lot of gay people might think Knockout is a bad stereotype, but also a lot of gay people might want to have some horizontal refreshment with him. I'm sure a lot of straight people just don't really care either way, so if you're LGBT and you think Knockout is offensive or a bad stereotype, that's completely fine. I don't mean to invalidate your feelings at all, and you're totally allowed to feel that way. I can understand that perspective completely. Personally, I don't find him all that offensive, and if I were to articulate to you why I feel that way, I don't know if I could. It just doesn't bother me all that much. I'm sorry guys, gals, and non-binary pals, I don't have an answer to this one. I really do not think Transformers Prime sets out for Knockout to become the gay icon he turned out to be, but does that really matter? Clearly, some people's readings of Knockout have aligned in such a way that an entire community has been built around this one character alone. People saw Knockout and have interpreted him in such a way that doesn't entirely contradict the events of the show or what Knockout does in said show. But then I guess that raises another question. If Knockout wasn't intended to be a gay rep, but retroactively became one, does that mean it's okay to criticize his portrayal as being stereotypical and offensive? As far as I know, the only time Prime's creators have ever acknowledged Knockout being gay was during a BotCon 2011 panel, where a small group of them seem almost uncomfortable to acknowledge this reading. Two of them in particular, executive producer Jeff Klein and producer-writer Duane Capizzi, both make a couple of bizarre statements to explain why Knockout is like that.
Bots don't necessarily have, they don't have to reproduce, so you don't have to really have that kind of thing going on.
There's a lot going on here, so we'll break it down real quick.
Nemesis is a very tough place. I don't know. I think it's a don't ask, don't tell kind of. I think it's a don't ask, don't tell kind of place.
Here, Jeff Klein makes the bizarre claim that the Decepticon army enforces the very real United States policy, don't ask, don't tell. This policy was created in 1994 and basically banned non-straight members of the United States military from disclosing their own sexual identity. It was a misguided attempt to protect members of the LGBT community who wanted to serve in the military, and resulted in over 13,000 troops being discharged up until the bill was repealed in 2011. Now, I know the Decepticons are meant to be evil, but isn't this like a little too real? If we're going to go with the narrative of Knockout being the gay rep of Transformers Prime, is this really the setting we're putting him in? A setting where you're claiming he's having to hide his own identity and lie about who he is to not piss off Megatron, who you've now canonized as probably being homophobic for not letting gays into his army. I mean, if that is the case, Knockout's probably doing a really bad job of hiding it, right?
There was a glitch in the level also.
I think this one's a little self-explanatory. I don't think calling gay people a mistake is the inclusionary win you think it is, sir. I don't like to think the worst of people, so I'm going to assume that this was not intended to be hateful or weird. The pair of them had to give some kind of answer, so they tried to be funny on the spot without really thinking through the implications of what they were saying. This was 2011, that was 14 years ago, for Christ's sake. That's a completely different world to the one we're in now. It was so long ago that when this panel happened, the don't ask, don't tell policy was still in effect. I'm not even that upset about their response. I'm more upset by the Oliver Twist-ass accent from this person asking the question.
Knockout is gay, isn't he?
Please, sir, is Knockout gay?
Knockout is gay, isn't he?
Obviously, neither of these statements should be taken all that seriously or as canon, but the fact somebody had to ask if Knockout was gay at all says everything you need to know about the intent of the creatives behind this show. In fact, Transformers Prime art director Jose Lopez had this to say about Knockout's design in the Transformers Prime art book.
When we started designing Knockout, the only directive was to make him a fast car, a foil for Bumblebee. I remember looking at rims and saying, just pimp him out. We gave him lots of red and gold. That made him feel more extravagant. I remember thinking that he'd be attractive in bot mode. Then the studio said that he's the sexiest bot they'd ever seen. That's where his vanity came from.
This isn't much to work off of, but here we get a better understanding behind the intent of the character. My reading of this statement is that Knockout's extravagance comes from his vanity. He's a stud and he knows it, and he wants to make sure you know it too. So circling back around to the question of whether Knockout should be criticized even though the evidence suggests he probably wasn't intended to be gay, I'd hesitantly say yes. Like, there's no way the creators of Prime couldn't have anticipated this reading, right? Were they unaware that this vanity could be so easily read as camp? Are they just oblivious? Are they stupid? The reason my answer was so hesitant was because I feel like the writers deserve more flack than the actual character of Knockout. It does feel really out of touch to write him in this way and seem perplexed when someone says he acts like he wants to kiss Megatron on his hot, wrinkly mouth.
So go on, Big M. Tell me you love me more than Starscream.
Something I completely forgot about until my most recent rewatch of the show was Knockout hitting on RC in the same manner in which he hits on all the guys in the show too.
You have lovely features. Perfect for a painful little procedure I call the nip and tuck.
If I was being a whack job conspiracy theorist, I would say that they put this in to make Knockout look less gay, but I have no basis for that sentiment at all. It kinda accidentally confirms he's probably bisexual instead. Maybe I need to rename this video to the Bisexual Transformer or something. Speaking of bisexual, a few years ago, Knockout's voice actor Darren Norris came out as bisexual. Some fans have made the completely unfounded claim that Knockout was his bi-awakening, and it was that role that allowed him to feel comfortable in his own body. Not only has this never been confirmed, but I think we probably shouldn't be making stuff up to try and make a character sound more progressive than they actually are. I think guessing the circumstances in which Darren Norris decided to come out of the closet is gross, and I would like it if you stop doing that, please. From what I can gather, Darren Norris likes Knockout, but in my research for this video, I couldn't find any interviews where he talked about the character at length. I'm not saying Darren Norris is the authority on whether or not thinking Knockout is queer is valid, but I do think hearing about his experience and maybe what direction he was given on the show would be a big help to further understanding this whole thing. So, elephant in the room time, let's talk about Breakdown. Breakdown is introduced in the same episode as Knockout and serves as a sort of foil to Knockout. It's a dynamic you've seen a million times. One's big and one's small, one's strong and one's fast. You know how it is. While Knockout displays a lot of very queer-coded characteristics, Breakdown doesn't. He's more of a generic brute archetype. Now, that doesn't mean Breakdown couldn't be gay. You can be gay and not act like Louis Spence.
What's gonna happen? Gonna shoot me? I doubt it. You'd have to catch me first, I'm like a whippet.
I would like to clarify that going forward, I am talking about the Transformers Prime version of these characters, not IDW 1 or 2. Both of these knockouts and breakdowns are canon lovers, they kiss and give each other cooties and stuff. IDW 1's knockout is very controversial and a much bigger can of worms than Prime knockout is, and I do not have the mental energy to talk about all that. I'm saving that for the shouting match I'm planning to have with my chiropractor. Just going off of the show, nothing else. Transformers Prime, the hit animated TV show alone, not much is done to show that Knockout and Breakdown are anything more than just partners. Maybe friends at a push. Though I do get a sense of camaraderie between the pair, and I think they genuinely do enjoy each other's company. There's a couple moments where Breakdown is just kinda hanging around with Knockout when he probably doesn't need to be. They go on a lot of missions together too. So what evidence is there towards these two being a couple? Like I said, they work together a lot in season 1, and Breakdown canonically buffs Knockout's finish, which could be seen as an intimate act by some.
Breakdown may act the brute, but he's a maestro behind a rotary buffer. Detailing was so much easier when Breakdown was around.
It's like if I broke into your house and did your makeup for you, right? Like that'd be pretty intimate. Spoiler warning, but in the middle of season 2, Breakdown gets his spine ripped out of his ass and dies. And Knockout's reaction to this is a resounding, "Oh well."
It doesn't trouble you to watch what remains of your former partner endure your scientific endeavors.
Not really.
Like, whenever Breakdown comes up, Knockout either doesn't care at all or he makes some kind of snarky joke. I've heard people justify Knockout's lack of reaction to Breakdown's death as him internalizing the trauma of losing the love of his life. That's fine as a headcanon, but it shouldn't be treated as gospel because that just isn't what happens in the show at all. If he is internalizing that grief, it's not shown to us in any way. Call me a prissy pants or whatever. But to me, this isn't enough to see them as a couple in Transformers Prime. Maybe I'm not shipping-brained, but as I've grown older and more comfortable in my own identity and sexuality, I've sort of come to terms with the fact that the face of queer rep in Transformers is entirely aura-based. And I think that's the conclusion I've reached with Knockout as a whole. It's less about the implied relationship between him and Breakdown or the intent of the creators, but more about the air he gives off and how people reacted to that. Knockout's aura is readable as one of such vehement queerness that it almost makes you forget Starscream's literally wearing heels. When I was a teenager, Knockout felt like the most daring, "Oh my god, can they get away with that?" gay representation I'd ever seen. Obviously, it's not, but this was before I'd seen Happy Together, so cut me some slack. I think something important to remember is the time period in which Transformers Prime came out. Back then, cartoons didn't really talk about gender or identity in the way they do now. Back in 2011, this might have seemed huge and groundbreaking to some. I don't know, I was too young. I didn't engage in fandom at all. I was a little baby playing Lego Batman on the Xbox 360, watching Transformers Prime and eating dinosaur nuggies without a care in the world while my parents argued in the other room about the insider trading they were doing getting discovered. I don't think Knockout is bad queer rep, whether they intended him to be or not, because I see him as more of a stepping stone to stronger, harder gays. I'm sure at least one person in the world saw Knockout in Transformers Prime and felt seen, and that's amazing. I mean that's genuinely great. I'm not gonna gatekeep how people came to terms with their own identity. You wanna know what my bi-awakening was? Jack fucking Skellington. So you know what? Knockout's queer as hell. Ship him with whoever you want. This whole video was just me trying to understand the intent of the creators and why the fans reacted in the way they did. And I feel like I've come to an understanding about both. The people in charge of Transformers Prime may have accidentally gifted the people with a fabulous gay icon that retroactively managed to warp their memories of how gay he actually was. The memories became so warped, in fact, that on Valentine's Day 2021, the official Transformers Instagram account canonized the pair as being a couple. I guess that goes to show how far fandom influence goes, and I think that's pretty awesome. For once, you guys did a pretty good job. Now your next mission? Justify Knockout's many piss jars. I have yet to see any fans figure out the purpose for his many piss jars. If we can get to the bottom of that, I can rest easy.
Breakdown? We're dropping here!